The arena breathed. Not metaphorically. It breathed, a rhythmic inhalation through membrane-lined vents along the domed ceiling, a sigh of methane and lavender spores that fogged the air with ceremonial stench. 80,000 beings crowded into the spiraling tiers of the Council Colosseum, some swaying, some clicking, some pulsing in bioluminescent pulses. The floor below shimmered with reactive gel, its color shifting with sentiment, a feature the Cypherians called democratic ambience, and the rest of the galaxy called a waste of sentient goo. A shrill voice rang out from somewhere above. The announcer, an 11-eyed cube encased in ceremonial bronze wire, levitated high above the center ring, humming with the pomp of a species born to narrate carnage with bureaucratic zeal. By consensus of the Quadratic Dominion and under Subclause 44C of the Neutralized Conflict Compact, the cube announced, "We welcome you to the final bout of the Tarka Enforcement Games." A roar, some literal, some chemical, rushed the Colosseum like a wave. Flesh quivered. Exoskeletons clicked like rain on tin. One especially enthusiastic delegate launched a handful of screaming spores that formed the shape of their champion's face before combusting. High above the pit, the council chambers loomed, a suspended platform lined with ancient judges, ambassadors, and gelatinous dignitaries who communicated through a combination of scent and mild electrical pulses. They watched in amused disdain, draped in neural gauze robes and the smug certainty of species who had never lost a war. Humans, predictably, had no section. Not that anyone noticed. Not really. The human delegation was one person. One figure, standing now at the entrance to the combat ring. Her armor matte, unadorned, marked only with a small, outdated Earth flag near the shoulder. General Mira Ellie Ward. Ex-colonial defense. Now just representative. Participant, technically. She inhaled once. The Colosseum exhaled again. The cube crackled. Representing the fragile and delightfully irregular species Homo sapiens, we welcome General Mira Ellie Ward of Terra 3. Do attempt not to rupture her. Mira didn't wave. She didn't bow. She stepped forward onto the arena's gel floor, boots hissing on contact. The color beneath her darkened, not from fear, but disdain. The arena could smell emotion. It had no idea what to do with restraint. Across from her, the opposing gate thudded open with melodramatic timing. Steam billowed out. Chains clattered. A shadow emerged, hulking, horned, shimmering with ceremonial war paint that glowed like magma. 10 feet of muscle, hide, and grudge stepped forward. Zul'Gra the Dusk Splitter, warrior of the Threx dominance, whose titles took 3 minutes to recite and 4 to regret. He sniffed the air as if testing her for seasoning. "You are smaller than your threat profile," he growled, voice like crushed bone dipped in oil. Mira tilted her head. "I've lost weight." He blinked. A few members of the crowd blinked, too, though with different organs. Zul'Gra raised a serrated blade longer than Mira was tall. "You die quickly. Be honored." Another inhale from the arena. Another exhale. Mira remained still, watching him the way a surgeon watches a clock. Her heartbeat didn't rise. She barely blinked. Instead, she ran a fingertip along her wrist, tapping a pattern against the inside of her gauntlet. The cube boomed again. As per tradition, the dance of humility shall now commence. Groans, hisses, and applause met that announcement. This was a beloved tradition of the Enforcement Games, a ritual required only of challengers who hadn't yet earned respect through combat. It was originally intended to demonstrate grace in the face of certain defeat. Mira stepped forward. She lifted her left arm in a slow, deliberate curve. Then, mid-gesture, gave the briefest, most irreverent shrug in diplomatic history. Half a bow. A twitch of her eyebrow. The arena paused. The floor turned an uncertain beige. Someone, somewhere, gasped. In the council platform, a Kithari elder leaned toward his aide. Was that a gesture of mocking compliance? The aide sniffed. Humans. Difficult to parse. Down below, Myra's eyes remained fixed on Zul'Gra. She didn't grin. She didn't blink. But her stillness was no longer still. It was a blade not yet drawn. He growled. I will decorate the swamp pits of Kesh with your broken crest. Myra's tone didn't shift. You decorate like you speak, noisy and lacking symmetry. The crowd hissed, clicked, and howled. Bets were shouted. One faction of aquatic fungi began a war chant involving interpretive bubbles. Meanwhile, Myra's internal HUD blinked calmly in her vision. Heart rate, stable. Enemy metrics, aligning. Environmental readouts, disadvantageous. She tapped once against her thigh to silence the alert. No need for reminders. The fight hadn't started, but the war had. Long ago, when Earth's second moon fell under precautionary orbital sterilization. When a council fleet moved too close, too fast, and too uninvited. She'd buried the reports in official channels. Waited. Watched. Volunteered. And when the games opened for new challengers under Subclause 44C, she'd signed Earth up without a vote. After all, diplomatic combat was still combat. The arena's breath caught. A low, sonorous gong echoed from the platform, vibrating through the gel and into the bones of every being present. The match was moments away. Zul'Gra stepped forward. A laugh formed in his throat, a deep, rattling thing that sounded like pride preparing to be punctured. And Mira whispered to no one, "Let them cheer for him. Let them think it's tradition." Because they weren't ready for what came next. The bell chimed with the tone of a dying star, low, stretched, and faintly resentful. The crowd roared like a malfunctioning weather system. Shrieking across registers meant only for mating or murder. Zul'Gra stepped forward first, absorbing the adoration like a heat lamp bred for war. His eyes, 6 of them, narrowed with purpose as he brandished his serrated blade. Ritual paint pulsed along his arms, reacting to pheromone surges and audience excitement. His footsteps cracked the arena gel with every stride, leaving behind scorch marks and bruised light. Mira didn't move. She let him come. Let him perform. He was accustomed to submission at first sight, the flinch, the staggered breath, the ceremonial plea for mercy masked as diplomacy. Myra's stillness unnerved him in a way he hadn't anticipated. For a species so famously fragile, she wasn't behaving like prey. There was no trembling, no quiver in the knees, no trembling lip begging the crowd to reconsider their bloodlust. Instead, she studied him. Not the way one studies a beast in a cage, but the way one assesses structural weaknesses in a condemned building. Her HUD displayed rhythm maps, past fight patterns, limb rotation data scraped from old tournament footage. It also displayed her heart rate, 48 BPM. Too calm. That, more than anything, bothered the announcer. She appears stationary, the cube intoned, audibly flipping through diplomatic commentary protocols. Perhaps invoking the Earth tradition of preemptive paralysis? Zul'Gra snarled, mocking delay. He lunged. No pageantry now, just raw momentum. He came in low, dragging the blade along the floor to throw up shrapnel and debris. Mira pivoted sharply, leaning back just far enough to let the edge pass within an inch of her ribs. The air itself gasped. Her return strike was a flat palm to his wrist. Not meant to harm, meant to measure. Zul'Gra felt it and laughed, twisting around, using his bulk to backhand her with the opposite fist. It connected. Her body crumpled, armor cracking along her side. She hit the gel with a wet slap and bounced once. The audience shrieked with delight. Some species emitted spores of victory. Others began predigesting celebratory organs. The gel beneath her went crimson, not from her wound, but from the arena's delight at theatrics. Mira coughed once, rolled to her knees, and stood. Zul'Gra frowned. Her breathing was labored but controlled. Internally, a diagnostic registered 2 fractured ribs and minor organ displacement. Pain meds activated. Her body was well trained. It had no interest in dignity, only continuation. Zul'Gra pointed the blade at her. Stay down. I will make it swift. Mira straightened her back with audible effort. You already made it sloppy. The crowd didn't laugh, but someone did, a thin, echoing chuckle from the lower tier, where a group of exo-lawyers from the Varn Consortium had gathered, watching the fight as legal precedent. One of them nudged the other. She's provoking him on purpose. Yes, the other replied. I believe she's preparing for a tactical rebuttal. Up above, the council had gone quiet. One delegate, a segmented orb with 6 translators, muttered, "She should be unconscious." "She is human," replied another, as if that explained everything. Zul'Jra launched again, this time less ritual and more rage. He brought the blade overhead. Mira sidestepped, too slowly, caught a grazing blow across the shoulder. Armor splintered. Sparks danced. She fell again, this time rolling with emotion. Her hand pressed to the floor, collecting a sample of the gel as she moved. She whispered the word, "Reactive." Zul'Jra bore down on her. Mira stood and stepped back just before his foot landed on the patch she'd smeared. The gel responded, shifting, liquefying briefly beneath him. His foot sank, just an inch, just long enough to disrupt his balance. Mira didn't strike. She watched him recover. Not yet. Every blow she absorbed taught her more: angles, force ratios, his tolerance for pain, his reliance on momentum. He hadn't trained to fight prey that refused to run. He hadn't planned for endurance. "Come on, human," he growled, circling. "All you do is bleed." Mira smiled, small, tired, bleeding. "You forgot we could." That struck a note deeper than intended. Because it was true. Humans hadn't won wars in this part of the galaxy. They hadn't even survived them. Colonies fell. Treaties broke. Inquiries were filed and forgotten. Earth was a footnote, a cautionary tale about emotional species overreaching. And yet here she was. Still standing. Still calculating. Myra's thoughts didn't wander. But one memory slipped through, the way her sister used to braid her hair before deployment. She'd hum while doing it. Even after the colony blackouts started. Even after the sky turned white from orbital burns. "Make them underestimate you," she used to say. "It's the only time they tell the truth." Zul'Jra attacked again. Mira feinted left, rolled right, elbowed the inside of his knee, and dropped a microcharge against his rear stabilizer muscle. He didn't notice. Not yet. But in 20 seconds, it would seize. She could wait. The cube announcer sounded almost offended now. And yet the human continues. Possibly under the influence of primitive hope. A wave of laughter rippled across the arena. Some mockery. Some confusion. A few species began recalculating their bets. Mira stood straighter now. Not because she was winning, but because the part where she loses was over. Let them think the blood was the point. It wasn't. It was what came next. The microcharge detonated with all the drama of a bubble popping underwater. No flash, no scream. Just a sudden failure in Zul'Jra's left knee that bent him sideways like a puppet whose strings had been misfiled. His gait faltered. He snarled, but it came out more confused than enraged. For a being bred in war cradles and praised in combat hymns, instability was not just unfamiliar, it was offensive. Mira didn't pounce. She let the moment linger, let the crowd struggle to translate what they just witnessed. The gel beneath her flickered green now. Hesitation. Interest. A quiet awareness that something fundamental had shifted. Zul'Jra recovered with a roar, compensating by shifting weight to his tail, dragging the blade in a sharp circle to keep her at bay. His movements were still thunderous, still terrifying, but now uneven. "You cheat," he spat, voice tinged with disbelief. Mira didn't blink. "You assumed rules applied the same to all blood." His nostrils flared. "We honor tradition." "No," she said, circling him. "You honor choreography." The announcer cube, sensing a narrative pivot, scrambled to catch up. "Fascinating developments," it blurted. "General Ward may be employing what some fringe scholars refer to as adaptive battlefield theory, also known as fighting dirty." The crowd hissed, hooted, and in one case, ejected a column of scent meant to indicate either dismay or fertility. A nearby Cephalon noble gagged. But others were watching differently now. The Varn Consortium lawyers had begun taking notes. A brittle-skinned trader from the Drax colonies turned to his companion and said, "She's not trying to win. She's trying to redefine what losing means." Mira wasn't listening to them. Her thoughts, as always, were methodical, arithmetic made meat. Zul'Jra favored the right leg. That gave her 37 degrees of exploitable bias. His tail compensated, but over-rotated on directional shifts. His respiration had increased. The paint across his biceps was no longer glowing in rhythm with his movement. That was fatigue, early onset, masked by adrenaline. The fight was no longer physical. It was geometric. She pivoted under another wide swing, letting the blade pass over her head by centimeters. The arena howled at her cowardice. She placed her palm flat to the floor mid-roll, triggering the gel beneath to mimic her weight signature, an echo that drew Zul'Jra's next strike to the wrong spot. He plunged the blade into an illusion. Realized too late. She drove her elbow into his flank, precise, just above the second lung cluster. He grunted. Not fatal. Not yet. He turned and grabbed her by the throat. Lifted. Her feet left the ground. Vision blurred. Alarms rang in her helmet. Bones flexed where they weren't designed to. His grip tightened like a vice. Myra's eyes didn't flinch, even as blood pooled beneath the surface of her skin. Even as her breathing slowed. Even then, she calculated. "You die now," he said, voice heavy with triumph and something almost like regret. She mouthed two silent words. He didn't understand them. Not until her fingers jammed into the seam of his gauntlet, where ceremonial armor met pride, and released a burst of electric current laced with the exact frequency to trigger Threxian nerve spasms. His arm seized. Dropped her. She landed hard, but rolled. Came up coughing, blood on her lips, but standing. The crowd froze. The announcer cube hovered lower, uncertain. According to Article 17F of the Combat Code, unsanctioned neural interference is a pause. Technically unregulated. The gel beneath Mira turned gold. Curiosity. Zul'Jra bellowed. His movements now bordered on feral, all strategy burned away by humiliation. He charged with both arms raised, tail whipping behind like a banner of desperation. He wasn't trying to win anymore. He wanted to erase the memory of faltering, which meant Mira had already won something more than the match. She sidestepped the charge and let him stumble past. He turned, clumsily. The crowd was silent now. Even the cube waited. Mira advanced. One step. Then another. Deliberate. Controlled. Zul'Jra lifted his blade one final time, but his knees buckled as he moved. The microcharge had done its work, and the electric burst had scrambled his stabilization reflexes. He swung too early. She ducked. Stepped inside the arc of the blow. Slid her foot forward and behind his leading leg. Pivoted. Her palm met the base of his skull. A soft push. He toppled like an altar being rejected by its own god. And then, silence. Not the silence of failure. The silence of recalibration. Mira stood over him, chest rising and falling with effort. Her visor flickered. Blood dripped from her side, from her mouth, from a dozen places that weren't vital, but loud. Above, the council remained still. The announcer cube spun once, slowly. Zul'Jra the Dusk Splitter is down. According to subsection B of Council Rule 12.3, paragraph 7, combat is concluded upon incapacitation or non-responsive state exceeding 6 seconds. The count began. Mira didn't move. Neither did Zul'Jra. At the 6th second, the arena floor turned white. Victory. There was no cheer. Not immediately. No eruption. No anthem. Just a vacuum where certainty used to be. She turned slowly, blood still leaking from her lip, and looked toward the highest tier, the council box. Her voice didn't rise, but carried through the arena like prophecy. You wanted blood. Her eyes never blinked. So now the blood reads the rules. ChatGPT said. The moment Zul'Jra's body hit the floor, the arena held its breath, as if by consensus, as if even the oxygen needed permission to move again. The colossal Threx warrior lay sprawled in a position no anatomy textbook would have dared predict. His blade, still humming with kinetic residue, had slipped from his grasp and embedded itself harmlessly in the gel some meters away, humming like a forgotten anthem. General Mira Ellie Ward remained upright. Barely. Her armor was torn open in places, leaking sparks and blood with equal indifference. One eye was already swelling shut. Her breath rasped through a fractured ribcage, but it came measured. Controlled. That was the problem, really. That's what unnerved the galaxy the most. She wasn't victorious. She was still calculating. The announcer cube twitched in its magnetic field, as if its protocol processors had just suffered an existential glitch. In accordance with Tarka enforcement procedure, the Council is advised to review the outcome of this match, pending confirmation of parameters, injuries, and, spirit. The cube's light flickered. Mira looked up at the hovering bureaucrats in their translucent observation box, their collective faces a mix of unreadable, unamused, and unpleasantly aware. None had stood. None had clapped. That, she noted, was telling. You wanted the ceremony, Mira said, voice rasped but clear, amplified by the arena's live feed systems now working much harder than they had for Zul-GRA. You called it tradition. You dressed it in law and scented flowers. But it was just spectacle. Just permission. The cube, daring a clarification, asked. And what precisely was it granting permission for, General? She tilted her head. To pretend it wasn't war. A silence deeper than defeat settled over the audience. The crowd, which had once bellowed for carnage, now leaned back into themselves, tentacles coiling, antennae flattening, gas sacs deflating in awkward embarrassment. No one wanted to be perceived clapping for the wrong future. Mira stepped forward, toward the center ring where the floor had gone dark beneath her, obsidian-colored, unreadable by the arena's emotion mimicry system. It couldn't process what she felt. Neither could most of them. Her left leg gave for half a step. She caught herself, barely. Still, she moved with the steadiness of a decision long since made. Above, the council stirred. One member, an elder of the Salken cluster with no mouth but 7 vocal cords, whispered through the comm line. She broke the precedent. She embarrassed the games. Worse, another answered. She made us listen. The cube blinked nervously. Would the council like to issue a formal declaration? A voice, oily and metallic, answered from the highest chair. The games have concluded. The human is, by technical ruling, victorious. The matter is closed. Mira let the silence after that statement stretch. Let it breathe. Then she looked up one last time. No, it isn't. The cube rotated. I beg clarification. You attacked our colony. You called it neutral containment. You glassed our cities, wiped families with a vote count, and then scheduled this tournament as if it were a gala. She let the words fall one by one, too slow to dismiss, too sharp to forget. You wanted us to play the part of the compliant loser. Smile for the record. Die on schedule. From the upper tiers, several diplomats began disconnecting their feeds. One ambassador dissolved into a mist cloud and floated briskly out of frame. Mira raised her voice, not loud, but controlled. The kind of calm that made people lean in, even as they wanted to look away. I came here because Earth no longer had a voice. You silenced it with treaties, tariffs, and tactical silence. But blood has its own way of voting. She turned now, walking toward the exit arch, a trail of crimson following her across the arena's gel surface. The color shifted from dark to brilliant red beneath her steps, no longer uncertain. The crowd parted itself in mood alone. She passed beneath the exit archway, and the Colosseum's light dimmed slightly, as if unsure whether the show was truly over. Behind her, Zul-GRA twitched once. Not in defiance. In confusion. The kind that lingers after defeat doesn't follow its usual script. The announcer cube hesitated one last time before ending the feed. And so concludes the Tarka enforcement games. The victor, General Mira Ward of Earth. May she be remembered. The cube trailed off. Because the truth was, they would remember her. Not because she won. Not because she survived. But because she didn't scream. She hadn't screamed when he hit her. When bones cracked. When the world spun red and the crowd demanded spectacle. She hadn't begged or shouted or flailed. And in a galaxy drunk on performance, silence was the loudest thing she could have offered. Far from the arena, in a modest satellite classroom orbiting a neutral moon, a child from a fringe mining colony watched the match replay on a lagging feed. Wide eyes. Small hands clenched in fascination. A whisper. She never screamed. And in the child's voice, just barely, was something that sounded like belief.